This happened in 2014 in the Maidan Square revolt in Ukraine. Prior to 2014, Russia completely dominated the natural gas market in Europe because North American companies could not compete. They could not compete on price because there's no natural gas pipeline that goes from Houston, Texas to Ukraine or to Germany or to Portugal. Well, if you're an oil and gas company, what's the best way to get that market? You use the US military and the US Central Intelligence Agency and the US State Department, and you've just captured a $1 trillion market with no improvement to your own products and services, all paid for by US taxpayers paying these government policies, but you need to have the policy personnel in place to do so. During the Yanukovych era, they signed a $10 billion deal with Chevron so that US oil companies were partnered. They signed a $10 billion deal with Shell, the major London giant. But they didn't give everything the State Department wanted. They didn't give everything NATO wanted. And a different puppet government would. He ran something like $5 billion of US aid funds into the right sector mobs that would effectively riot. Yanukovych had to flee because of violent riots.
At this hour, it appears Russian military forces are crossing the border into neighboring Ukraine, in a region of Ukraine known as Crimea. Late today, President Obama went on national television to warn Russia against a military intervention.
And indeed, the United States will stand with the international community in affirming that there will be costs for any military intervention in Ukraine.
The Obama administration was not expecting Crimea to break away, and the Donbass to break away, and fell into a panic when Crimea voted to join the Russian Federation. The Luhansk and Donetsk regions declared themselves independent, and when that happened, Ukraine became the central focus of US statecraft and the central focus especially of NATO. And as all these different industries, which had made giant pre-investments in a successful coup, as I mentioned, Chevron, $10 billion of investment. Shell, $10 billion of investment. And where were their deposits? They were offshore of Crimea and east of the Dnieper River in the very breakaway part of the state. And so the only way to get those investments back is if the US military, directly or indirectly by funding Ukraine, seizes it back. That's why they went after Trump with the Russiagate and with the FBI probes and with the CIA impeachments and things like that.
I'm going to take a look at it. But, you know, the people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia than where they were. And you have to look at that also. Now, that was under, just so you understand, that was done under Obama's administration. And as far as the Ukraine is concerned, it's a mess. And that's under the Obama's administration with his strong ties to NATO. So with all of these strong ties to NATO, Ukraine is a mess. Crimea has been taken. Don't blame Donald Trump for that.
You said
and we'll do better, and yet we'll have a better relationship with Russia. And having a good relationship, maybe, and having a good relationship with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing.
Yeah, I think Trumpism was seen as a threat, and he personally was seen as a threat. You know, his willingness to kind of be skeptical of conventional wisdom from both parties is something that was seen as a threat. But they kind of saw not so much Trump, but the idea that government was to be treated with such skepticism as something that needed to be stamped out.
The CIA is not allowed to operate domestically. The Department of Defense is not allowed to operate domestically. The Department of State is not allowed to operate domestically. USAID is not allowed to operate domestically, but there's one exception. There's one get out of limitations-free card, and that is the CIA can spy on an American if they suspect that American of working with a foreign power.
Tonight, President Obama, for the first time, publicly blaming Russian President Vladimir Putin for hacking the 2016 U.S. election.
The intelligence that I've seen gives me great confidence in their assessment that the Russians carried out this hacking.
And the CIA and FBI agree as to why. Director John Brennan telling the CIA workforce in an internal message that, quote, there is strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, and intent of Russian interference in our presidential election.
I'm John Solomon. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Just the News, a longtime investigative reporter. And when the Russia collusion story broke in fall of 16, my FBI sources told me there's nothing there. It's just a ruse, or it's going to go away after the election. It's not true. We're pretty confident it's not true. And by the way, you look at the documents now, they knew around that time it wasn't true. They knew the Steele dossier wasn't true. But by January, February, March, it had gotten a fever pitch, and I kept wondering to myself, how could it be that something that's not true be taken so seriously and be portrayed as true?
Now, you referenced this President's Daily Brief document that was drafted for President Obama in early December that reaffirmed what the intelligence community professionals, as you say, had been assessing for the previous 6 months leading up to the election, which was that Russia neither had the intent nor capability to essentially hack the outcome of the U.S. election. As you said, President Obama's political appointees pulled that document before it could be published, and it has not been published until we released it today. Then DNI James Clapper took the lead on what President Obama wanted done, and which was essentially create a document that tells us not if, but how Russia interfered with the election.